Cosmetic family?
Hey, thank you for joining the Cosmetic Podcast.
Cosmetic means being a person or thing that gives rise to a phenomenon that is dynamic or energizing.
Hey, we're tackling topics and telling the truth.
I'm Rodrigo Ross.
I'm Keith Benson.
So today we are talking about separate but not equal. And not in the sense that many may be thinking. We're not talking about the Board of Ed case that ended segregation in schools. We're talking about gender equity. Not gender equality, right? Because those are different.
Equity.
And
so how would you explain the difference?
So equality means each individual or group of people is given the same resources and opportunities, which is not a bad thing. That's good. We love that. But equity recognizes that each person has different circumstances and allocates resources and opportunities needed to reach an equal outcome based on what their circumstances.
Yeah, and it's that equity that leads to equality.
Right.
And so when we talk about gender equity, that's talking about that, you're looking at employment by women and men of, kind of that socially valued type goods and opportunities, resources and rewards. And we really need to take a look at this. I mean, there's a lot that's being talked about in the media right now about this, but it's like, who is doing the work to make sure that we get to this place that we can have this equity?
Yeah, and who's moving across the spectrum? Because in my mind, right, there's a spectrum, and equality seems to be the first part, right? It's the end, but equity is the means to that end. Like you got to look at the equity space if you really want to get to gender equality. It doesn't mean that men and women will be the same. But it does mean that women's and men's rights and responsibilities and opportunity will not solely depend on whether or not they were born or identify as male or female.
Right. And we're in this place. What I want to do is I want to give you some definitions.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
And let me get your... All right. This definition of pushy.
Okay.
The way in which a woman who is skilled at using reasoning to persuade someone to do or believe something is described due to unconscious gender bias.
I agree, right? Because I've seen those very same behaviors in a man be described as charismatic, right? Or persuasive. But when a woman does it, right, it seems like she's acting out of character, and then she's pushy, and she shouldn't act that way, and it's like maybe she's passionate about something, maybe she's really trying to persuade you, and why can't she be charismatic and really trying to move the needle and stuff? So I have definitely heard pushy being used in a way that would indicate that person has some gender bias.
Okay.
Yep.
So here you go. Aggressive. The way in which a woman who has or show a confident personality is labeled due to unconscious gender bias.
I've seen that too, right? Women who know what they want, know what they don't want, not gonna let you persuade or dissuade them from either one. Gonna hold you accountable, right? Like keep their finger right on the button, but like, so remember this and remember that, and how about this, and let's think about this. I have seen them be referred to as aggressive, and once again, with a negative connotation, like when in some instances when men are considered aggressive, that's a good thing, right? Like they're pushing, they're providing, they're assertive, they're conquerors, they're like it's like I've heard that. I wonder if people call me aggressive or pushy. Not that I really care. I don't know. You're real quiet right now.
No. Aggressive is not a bad thing. I think it can be used both ways. If you are assertive enough and you're going out there and you're getting the job done, we shouldn't characterize a woman just in this one frame of, what we used to perceive a woman to be. Yeah. But now, here in the workplace, hey, who's getting the job done?
But I mean, words matter, right? Like the difference between saying someone is assertive as opposed to saying that they're aggressive, right? It makes a difference.
So, bossy.
Well, now I'm gonna tell you.
All right. The way in which a woman who excels at taking charge of a situation or project is labeled due to unconscious gender bias.
But I think this one is changing, right? So bossy now, and probably it's because women have grabbed a hold of the term and are trying to change the narrative. That's not really a bad thing. Like, I'm bossy and I'm flossy and I'm fine with that. Like, I don't know, bossy.
Because I go with the word, you drop the Y from that, and that's what I hear a lot. It's like, you're a
I'm
boss.
the boss.
Yeah.
It's bossy. I don't know. I think that one is going through a bit of an evolution. Like, people are grabbing hold and they're changing the narrative around that word. And women are embracing it like, heck yeah, I'm bossy because I'm the boss. Well, that's right.
And there's that. And period. All right. Feisty. The way in which a woman who tirelessly defends a decision or opinion she strongly believes in is described due to unconscious gender bias.
I think that one may be going through a bit of an evolution as well. I've heard or I've experienced feisty being used in a positive way. Like, there's also this underlying connotation that they're energetic and they're full of life, and you can expect them to sway the environment when they step into the place, and they can change the course of a conversation. And so I've heard feisty both ways too. Like, oh, she's feisty. I like that. Like, yeah, bring it to him. Give him the business.
But so oftentimes, so these words, when we talk about pushy, we talk about aggressive, we talk about bossy, we talk about feisty, those words are used in this negative connotation.
Absolutely.
And again,
Absolutely.
when you talk about a male being pushy, well, they're persuasive.
Yeah.
Or a man being aggressive, a woman being aggressive, it's a man is assertive. Or a woman is being bossy, but they're a boss. I mean, you have these different synonyms that be able to describe men and women in this different place. And when somebody's out there getting results done, it doesn't make a difference whether it's male, whether it's female that's out there getting it done. I mean, they're moving in this right way.
Well, I think a lot of that is based on a couple of basic facts, right? So in this country, well, and heck, if you look at it from a global perspective, in no country on this planet are women equal, right? Like, you may have some spaces where there are some gains, but generally speaking, the World Economic Forum projects that it will take 170 years to reach gender equity in North America, right? And so when you think about terms like that, you kind of think where they come from or how they continue to stay rooted in the conversation and in the systems. Just that fact alone means that it will take 5 more generations of people for us to see gender equity and gender equality. That's 5 more generations of people using those definitions, attempting to change the narrative, and trying to bust up and disrupt systems. And it can be disheartening and it could be frustrating, but the reality is more and more people at least know and are realizing that this is a challenge and we need to start the work now. But that's why this kind of stuff kind of flourishes, because there's no gold standard, there's no guide star, there's nothing that we can try to emulate on the planet where women and men are truly equal and there's equality and equity.
And so on average, when we talk about American women, they're more educated than men. For decades, women have earned more bachelor's degrees, master's degrees, doctorate than men, but yet when we talk about the U.S. workforce, they still earn less than what males do in that space. And some statistics show that as much as a woman may earn 80% of what a male is paid. And man, and we're talking about in the same type of positions. Like that gap has to be able to close at some point in time.
Yeah, I mean, because the reality is, even before the woman gets the job and has the potential of not earning similar wages, if there's only one woman in a candidate pool for a position, there is statistically no chance that she'll even get the job, right? And so that's one hurdle that has to be jumped. Then if she jumped that hurdle, she got the job, she's in the spot, probably not making comparable salary to a male counterpart. even in that space, men are promoted at a 30% higher rate than women, particularly early on in their career. So there seems to constantly be these hoops and these hurdles and these things that women have to jump through in order to thrive, because we don't have, and I believe that many people figure, well, no, there's a woman in the space. There are women occupying roles and jobs that were absolutely male dominated before. And so, okay, we're reaching equality. Yeah, but there are so many triggers and so many things that happen that could be prohibitive before a woman could get there, that lets us know that we may be trying to get to equality, but I don't really think we're touching this equity thing the way we should be, unless there wouldn't be so many barriers in the way.
And these barriers, we got to figure out how to knock down some of these barriers and be able to close these gaps that we have. When we look at, our Fortune 500 companies and who's leading those up right there, when we look into just, within our YMCA environment itself, who's leading those efforts right there, and who's holding what seats. And so it's someplace that as leaders, we have to be able to create a talent pool that is not biased, right?
Yeah.
And so that we can make sure that we're putting people in those right seats, we're making those right decisions. And then, in looking at pay, how are we doing those wage analysis within our operations in order to be able to see it? Are those, is that data true for, whoever's listening to this podcast? Is that type of data true for your operation right there?
Yeah.
Who's taking up that cause? Who's taking up that case within your operations?
And then the other thing is that we're noticing across the movement is that for your entry level and maybe your mid-management roles in the Y Across the movement, clearly dominated by women. But the higher up you go, the less women you see, right? And so how is that possible? What in the system is causing that matriculation not to happen? Because here's another data point. Data shows that 90% of women leave the workforce or the workplace because of problems other than childbirth, right? So there's this misnomer and this misconception out there that, most women transition out of the workforce or out of the workplace because they're caring for children or they just had a child or whatever. And be like, no, that's only about 10% of women. Like 90% leave because of the equality and the equity challenges that exist. The fact that they are in abundance in certain levels and strata across your organization, but they never seem to crack those next levels. And what is it in the system that is keeping that from happening?
Yeah, yes, there was a perception of women at some point and leaving the workforce for having children. But what are we doing now for women to be able to make that environment just that much more better?
Yeah.
So if that is daycare on site, and that's not just for the woman, but that is for just for your staff altogether. Is that are we creating these environments in such a way that it's going to have this equality, such that people can survive in a long-term way? And what I mean by that is, if that is the woman who has had a child, she wants to continue to work, do we have an environment that is going to be inclusive enough for her? And that's for the father who's out there that's married or have the child as well. Is the environment in such a way that it's going to be inclusive for them to be able to continue to work in that space without causing some harm? But the childbearing thing should not be on the table for whether somebody gets advancement or not.
And here's the thing too that I found very interesting. You would think that the brunt or the onus of the work is on the folks, who are shaping the culture and the practices and policies of the workplace. However, there is an equal responsibility for gender equity to start at home. And so here's what I mean. During the pandemic, many folks have realized, or many men have really kind of taken notice and become more aware of the fact that in many instances, women have two full-time jobs. The paid one and the unpaid one,
Okay.
right? Because of gender roles that exist in many households, the woman is taking care of the kids, she cooking the dinner, she doing the shopping, she doing the cleaning, and that's not to say that the man is at home saying, do this, do that, do this, do that, but typically that's how gender roles are set up in the home. And so when the pandemic happened and many men had to step in and they had to cook and everybody eating burnt up food and you didn't put the Lowry's in, right? And why is every piece of clothing in the washing machine together bleeding on one another? They had this epiphany like, oh snap, like the unpaid work is just as intense. Where's the equity? And converse to that, some men had it even worse. If their women worked in the healthcare field or if they were considered essential workers and if she was really out of the house during the pandemic, baby hair looked crazy. Nobody combed the baby's hair. And they're starting to realize, dang, gender equity has to start here in order for us to go to our respective workplaces. And because if a woman has that stuff taken care of at home and they don't have to worry about that, and that's not something that's on autoplay in the back of their mind, they absolutely can perform differently in the workplace, so to speak, quote unquote.
Well, here's what I learned at home.
Oh, Lord.
As we used to say back in the day, I'm gonna bust some suds.
Yeah, you better.
Because see, the brother's already been identified in his household as the least one who can cook.
Well,
and my wife, she can put something on.
Okay.
On the stove.
Okay.
And so therefore, what I come along the way is that we quote unquote have our roles.
Yep.
Like, my wife doesn't go outside and do the grass. Even in a joking conversation, is look at me like I'm crazy if you even think about bringing that up.
I tell you too. That's not what I do. I don't cut grass.
Yeah, and then when I try my hand at cooking. Oh, it ain't even a conversation no more. And so I try not to show that talent around the house.
What did you try and cook? You got to start with the basics.
Well,
did you try to jump out?
We're not going to tell America about all those stories.
That means
we'll say that for when we come face to face with one another, and I can share those stories with folks.
It was terrible.
But I think for our generation, there was this kind of traditional thing, but we've evolved over times, and there's still certain roles, quote unquote, that you play. But when it comes to the workplace, and we're talking about people doing being in places where they should get promoted because of their quality of work, or people are not getting promoted because of their quality of work, that is a high level of what's the best word to say that? As a high level inequality that is right there,
and based on bias,
right?
Because and I would like to say, so here's me being a little bit messy right here. Most people. Well, not most people. Some people would say, oh, that's because I had an unconscious bias. I didn't realize I was doing that. But I think some of this is very conscious. Like, there is a bias. You have a bias towards a certain gender being in a certain role because that's your lived experience, right? Mm-hmm. And you are really struggling with seeing it a different way. Like, I've had conversations myself over the course of the years with some males who really struggle with having a female supervisor, right? And there are things that a male supervisor could say and do and a tone they could use or behaviors that they could exhibit, and they wouldn't think twice about it if it was coming from their male supervisor. But when it came from a woman supervisor, there was a brush up, or they figure they have to tell them what to do, or they figure they have to kind of assume this role or this persona as I'm the superhero and I'm gonna save you and this and there are definitely some men out there who are struggling with having, but if we're gonna create really equal and equitable spaces, there are going to have to be a lot of males who are going to have to reckon with, you got a female boss, and you can't attribute some of those definitions that we talked about earlier to them when you guys have a differing of opinion or a differing of style, or when they're pushing you. Because would you say the same thing if you had a male supervisor? And some of them absolutely, right? They might use the same, but I would venture to say there's a considerable amount of men who would not.
And we think about those who are in leadership, but they're probably coming from that traditional type of background. Mm-hmm. And then when we look at most of our organizations and we see, I don't know, let's just call it the 40-plus crowd. And that 40-plus crowd...
I'm not in that crowd.
That 40-plus crowd... that 40 plus crowd is coming from a traditional type of background, and have seen some different lived experiences that they bring over to the workplace, and they hold on to those things because that's what their lifestyle is growing up, and they have to be able to let go of those things right there. I mean, it's just not okay just to be able to think in this traditional way that a woman's supposed to do this and a man's supposed to do this right here. When we talk about in the workplace and talking about equal thought around the table, it's like everybody's creative enough to come up with ideas. Everybody has that ability to be able to make strong decisions and justify the reason that they're making these decisions and being able to move an organization forward. That doesn't make a difference whether you are female or whether you're a male. Like you be able to respect the thought of the people that are coming to the room. I mean, because there's everybody's bringing some different experience to the table, and you got to be able to respect that. And that's men and women sitting around the table making these great bold decisions so that we can move this organization in a great way. And especially when we talk about in this nonprofit space that we live in as the Wives, that we're impacting communities, and it's just not a one-track thought as it relates to doing that right there. And so we got to be respectful of all the different opinions around the table.
And as a woman, there are certain things I have to check myself on, right? And so surely I would love for men to be intentional about being allies in this space, right? Like really advocating and helping to understand and walking alongside and being a co-conspirator and helping to dismantle systems. But if I have to tell the God's honest truth, and that's what we do here, we tackle the topics and telling the truth. There is a responsibility for women, because I have absolutely, and I know many women who hold the very same reverence for gender roles, right? And this is a man's job and this is a woman's job, and this whole idea of chivalry, right? And how that shows up in the workspace and what they're supposed to do. That could be, slowing down the movement. Like I had a staff person one time that we just really had to have a sit down conversation, because I noticed that he was much harder on his male staff about certain things that they would or would not do based on the feedback and the intel he was getting from his mom about chivalry, right? And so he was being harder on his male staff if they didn't, lift all the heavy stuff or take out the heavy trash or do all the manual labor, even though he had females on his staff who were willing and capable of doing that. He was really, being hard on them because he's hearing his mom in the back of his head about chivalry and men supposed to do this and men supposed to do that. And so it wasn't necessarily his bias. It was him trying to be respectful and reacting to a bias from women around this whole idea of chivalry and gender roles, and men are supposed to do this, that, and the other thing. And I'm a believer in chivalry. I like for somebody to hold the door for me. Don't get me wrong. But I do think that as a woman, sometimes in our effort to kind of uphold some of these values, or even our internalizing of gender roles from generations of the past, we kind of shoot ourselves in the foot.
Yeah, and I would say from the male perspective, it's that fine place of that right there. Whereas that, I'm a yes ma'am, no ma'am type person. I said one too many times to my mama back when I was in first grade. She made me write 50 times on the big, the big green sheets of paper with the fat pencil. No ma'am, yes ma'am. No sir, yes sir. And so,
because wasn't gonna cut it. I understand. I done made you write it too.
I say that young, old. I say yes ma'am and no ma'am. And I had a lady say, don't say no ma'am to me. I'm like. That's what I know out of respect. That's not, because of you. Like, I'm saying that.
She might have thought you was trying to call her a little old lady or something.
Right. And so, like, you come in the workplace with these values that you've gained from home, and then you bring those into the workplace. Yeah. And it's that fine line. And it's like, so I think on both sides there's a place that, some give and take take on all of that?
That sounds like another podcast, though, where we just talk about chivalry, right? This idea of chivalry, is it antiquated or not? I don't think so, but that's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah, we'll talk about that another time.
Yeah.
So this very, very powerful conversation around this right here. And, we have to be able to have a workplace where we are making sure that there's equality and equity
yes.
that is there for both, So thank you guys for listening to Cosmetic.
Where we're tackling topics and telling the truth.
Subscribe and listen to us weekly.
And don't be shy. Give us a review. We'd love to hear from you.
And as always,
be dynamic.
Be phenomenal.
Be cosmetic.